Right now in Phoenix, Arizona, an extreme heat warning is active until 8 o'clock tonight, covering Yuma, the Parker Valley, and the Salton Sea region. In Missouri, an extreme heat warning is stacked directly on top of it, with heat index values expected to climb as high as 109 degrees through Thursday, and overnight lows that won't drop below the 70s, meaning there's genuinely no relief even after the sun goes down. In North Texas, fire officials are watching Thursday specifically, when hot, dry conditions collide with increasing winds and humidity dropping below 25%. A combination, they say, will meaningfully increase the grass fire threat across the region. And in Wilmington, North Carolina, a first alert weather day has already been issued because temperatures that feel like the middle 100s are expected to hold on for several consecutive days. This isn't one bad afternoon. This is a full week where nearly every single day brings something worse than the day before it, across totally different parts of the country, for totally different reasons. Today we're walking through exactly what this week's forecast actually looks like, region by region, day by day, straight from the National Weather Service offices, and meteorologists tracking it right now. No exaggeration, just what's actually in the forecast. If you want to keep following how this week develops, subscribe and turn on notifications, because conditions are shifting daily across multiple regions at once. A thumbs up helps this critical information reach more people who need it. Let's get into it. Let's start with the National Weather Service's own national outlook, because it frames the entire week in a single useful sentence. According to the agency's most recent summary, scattered showers and storms are expected across portions of the central and eastern United States through the end of the week, while at the same time, dangerous heat will intensify across the desert southwest and intermountain west. On top of that, hot, dry weather combined with increasing winds is expected to allow elevated wildfire conditions to return specifically to the northern intermountain west, a region where air quality issues are already persisting from wildfires that have continued burning there for weeks. That single official summary captures the core problem with this week: 3 genuinely different, serious weather threats, all escalating simultaneously in 3 different parts of the country, none of them canceling each other out or offering the rest of the nation any real relief. Let's take these one at a time, starting with the heat, because it's the most widespread single threat currently active across the country right now. In Arizona, the National Weather Service office in Phoenix issued an extreme heat warning running from just after midnight through 8 p.m. Tonight, covering Yuma, the Parker Valley, the Salton Sea area, and several surrounding regions. This isn't a first-time event for the region this summer, but it reflects a pattern that's continued reasserting itself across the desert southwest week after week. Exactly the kind of sustained, grinding heat that wears down infrastructure, agricultural workers, and vulnerable residents even when no single day sets an outright record. Farther east, in Missouri, first alert meteorologists issued their own extreme heat warning, active through 8 p.m. Thursday, with a specific detail worth understanding clearly. Afternoon highs will technically only reach the 90s, numbers that might not sound especially alarming on their own, but heat index values, the feels-like temperature that accounts for humidity, are expected to range between 100 and 109 degrees. Forecasters were direct about why this specific combination matters, stating plainly that this extreme heat is hot enough to cause serious health risks, especially for children, older adults, and anyone managing existing health conditions. And here's the detail that makes this particular heat event genuinely more dangerous than a typical hot day. Overnight lows are expected to stay in the 70s, meaning there's essentially no meaningful nighttime cool down for the body to recover during night after night through the entire warning period. That same pattern is playing out simultaneously in North Carolina, where Wilmington's first alert meteorologists issued a suite of first alert weather days specifically because heat is intensifying through this week. Monday brought high temperatures in the lower 90s with feels-like readings in the lower to middle 100s, along with a 50% chance of showers and locally heavy storms. But forecasters were specific that Tuesday and the several days following would actually feel worse, not better, with conditions shifting to feel more like the middle 100s to around 110 degrees, even without the storm chances that had offered at least some relief on Monday. Meteorologists there did note that current tropical activity, specifically a wave of low pressure approaching the Caribbean and another riding north of Bermuda, both have limited development windows this week, meaning no definable tropical storm threats currently exist for the Carolinas, even as a separate wave exiting Africa may find a better environment to develop by the weekend. Worth watching, given that the next names on the 2026 storm list are Cristobal and Dolly. Down in Texas, the National Weather Service's Fort Worth office laid out a genuinely specific, escalating threat for later this week that connects heat directly to fire danger in a way that's worth understanding clearly. According to their most recent forecast discussion, an extended period of hot and dry weather will combine with increasing southerly winds and low humidity by the latter part of the week, and officials were explicit that this combination will lead to an increase in the grass fire threat across the region, particularly on Thursday. The specific numbers behind that warning are genuinely severe, highs topping out between 99 and 102 degrees, combined with humidity dropping below 25% and winds increasing to 15 to 25 miles per hour at times, conditions capable of helping any grass fire that ignites spread rapidly across the landscape. Even today, before that Thursday peak arrives, forecasters noted seasonably hot weather continuing with highs near 100 degrees area-wide, with a low chance of storms mainly south of Interstate 20 this afternoon and evening, storms that, if they do develop, will be capable of producing strong, gusty winds of their own. Now, let's shift to Florida, because the story here looks genuinely different from the heat-dominated pattern gripping Texas and the Southwest, and it's worth understanding why. According to the state's official weather tracking through the Florida Division of Emergency Management, a typical summer-like day is currently on tap as high pressure builds across the state, actually suppressing thunderstorm activity below normal levels for this time of year. Isolated to widely scattered storms remain possible throughout the state, with a few capable of producing locally heavy downpours severe enough to cause nuisance flooding, keeping a marginal risk, the lowest tier on the 4-level flash flood risk scale, in place statewide. Heat continues climbing regardless, with heat index values peaking in the middle 100s and heat advisories active for portions of southeast and southwest Florida. There's also a moderate risk for rip currents outlooked along the state's east coast and panhandle, a genuinely serious, often underappreciated hazard that claims more lives in an average year than most people realize. On the fire side specifically, Florida's overall wildfire threat remains low today, given relative humidity staying well above critical thresholds and winds remaining light. Though the Florida Forest Service confirmed 13 active wildfires are still burning across the state, covering approximately 2,610 acres, even during what's otherwise being described as a relatively typical, unremarkable summer day for the state. There's actually a piece of genuinely good news buried in Florida's latest update too, and it's worth including because an honest forecast roundup means giving the full picture. According to the state's most recent drought tracking, notable categorical drought improvements were observed across many parts of Florida this past week as a slow-moving frontal boundary interacted with richly moist air to produce widespread heavy rainfall over the weekend, with the Big Bend region specifically seeing nearly every county drop by one full categorical drought level. That's a genuine, meaningful improvement, and it stands in real contrast to the drought conditions worsening across the plains and southwest during this same stretch, a reminder that this week's forecast genuinely isn't uniformly bad everywhere, even if the overall national picture skews toward escalating, compounding threats. Let's look at one more specific region in detail, because it illustrates something genuinely important about how quickly conditions are shifting this particular week, sometimes for the better, which is worth acknowledging honestly. According to Bouldercast's most recent weekly outlook for Colorado's Front Range, published this Monday morning, the region is expecting highs in the mid to upper 90s both Monday and Tuesday, with a few hotter pockets briefly tagging 100 degrees, though not widespread. But the forecast contains a specific, genuinely welcome shift for later in the week. Meteorologists highlighted a slight flash flood risk specifically for Thursday across the Front Range in northeast Colorado, potentially extending into Friday, tied to what they describe as finally seeing a setup that favors a return to beneficial, soaking rainfall for much of the Boulder-Denver corridor. Even more notably, their forecast projects that cooler, wetter weather looks to stick around for at least a week following that transition, with ensemble model guidance showing no 90-degree readings at all through the following week, a genuinely significant sustained cool down after what's been a punishing stretch of heat domes cycling through the region for weeks. It's worth being transparent about something specific in how forecasts like this one get built and communicated, because it matters for how you should actually use this information day to day. Bouldercast's own disclaimer on their weekly outlook is genuinely instructive here, noting explicitly that their weekly forecast is created Monday morning and covers the entire upcoming week, but that accuracy will naturally decrease as the week progresses, since that specific post isn't continuously updated. That's honest, useful context that applies well beyond just one regional forecasting service. A 7-day outlook published on a Monday is a genuinely useful tool for understanding the broad shape of the week ahead, but the specific details, exact temperatures, exact storm timing, exact flood risk levels, should be expected to sharpen and sometimes shift as each individual day actually approaches, which is exactly why checking updated, shorter-range forecasts as the week unfolds matters more than treating any single Monday morning outlook as the final word. Let's also look at what's happening farther north, in Connecticut, because it adds yet another distinct piece to this week's genuinely varied national picture. According to a technical forecast discussion from meteorologists covering the state, the region is watching the return of wildfire smoke aloft, this time specifically the result of wildfires burning in the Pacific Northwest. smoke that has traveled thousands of miles across the country before settling over New England. The genuinely reassuring detail here is that this smoke is expected to stay high in the atmosphere, meaning any direct air quality impacts on the ground look to be limited, even though it made for a notably vibrant, smoke-tinted sunset. As humidity briefly dropped off overnight, forecasters described a relatively chilly evening with lows in the upper 50s to low 60s, genuinely comfortable conditions, perfect for opening windows and giving air conditioning systems a break, before muggier air takes hold again and temperatures climb back toward 90 inland, potentially extending what would become a fifth and final day of the region's second heat wave of 2026. That heat wave itself is worth understanding in historical context, since it began in late June with a peak that reached 100 degrees in the Hartford area, breaking a record that had stood since 1966, with heat index values during that peak reaching between 105 and 115 degrees under an extreme heat warning covering the entire state. So, stepping back and looking at this genuinely sprawling multi-region picture all at once, what's the actual through line connecting Phoenix's extreme heat warning, Missouri's dangerous heat index readings, North Carolina's stacked first alert weather days, Texas's Thursday fire danger spike, Florida's RIP current risk and lingering active wildfires, Colorado's coming flash flood risk and welcome cooldown, and Connecticut's traveling wildfire smoke? It's this. Nearly every region of the country is currently managing its own specific, escalating version of extreme weather simultaneously, driven by different local mechanisms, but connected by the same and broader summer pattern of persistent heat domes, elevated fire risk, and increasingly active storm tracks working through different parts of the country at different times throughout the same 7-day stretch. Some of these threats are genuinely worsening day by day, as officials in Texas and North Carolina have explicitly forecast. Others, like Colorado's transition toward cooler, wetter conditions, are actually genuinely improving as the week progresses, a detail worth holding on to so this roundup doesn't overstate the case in either direction. For anyone trying to figure out what being ready actually looks like this week, depending on where you live, the guidance breaks down region by region. If you're anywhere under an active extreme heat warning right now, whether that's the desert Southwest, the Mississippi Valley, or the Southeast, take the specific detail about minimal overnight cooling seriously, since heat that doesn't meaningfully break at night is considerably more dangerous to the body than a single scorching afternoon followed by genuine nighttime relief. Check on elderly neighbors, limit outdoor activity during peak afternoon hours, and stay hydrated throughout the day rather than only when you start to feel thirsty. If you're in North Texas or anywhere else facing that Thursday combination of heat, low humidity, and increasing wind, treat any open flame or spark-producing activity with real caution specifically on that day, given how directly officials have connected those exact conditions to elevated grass fire risk. If you're along Florida's coastline, take that moderate risk RIP current outlook seriously, even on days that otherwise look calm and typical, since RIP currents remain one of the most underestimated weather-related hazards in the entire country. And if you're in Colorado or anywhere else expecting a transition toward cooler, wetter conditions later this week, don't let the good news about the heat dome breaking distract you from the specific flash flood risk officials have flagged for Thursday and Friday, since a shift from extended drought and heat directly into heavy rainfall is exactly the kind of transition capable of producing flash flooding even in areas that desperately need the moisture. The honest bottom line across this entire week is that there isn't one single national weather story to point to right now. There are several, playing out simultaneously across different regions, some genuinely worsening as officials have explicitly forecast, others genuinely improving, and nearly all of them requiring the specific kind of region-by-region attention that a single national headline can't fully capture on its own. We'll keep tracking how this week continues to develop across every region covered here, and we'll bring you updates as conditions shift day by day. Subscribe so you don't miss those updates. And genuinely, wherever you're watching this from, take a few minutes today to check your own local National Weather Service forecast directly, since the specific threat that matters most to you this week, whether that's heat, fire, flooding, or rip currents, depends entirely on exactly where you live. Drop a comment letting me know what conditions actually look like in your area right now. Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one.